Prayer is boring. I'm too busy to pray. Prayer doesn't even work. There are so many myths and misconceptions about prayer out there in the world, but today we're going to be breaking down those myths and talking about the real truth about prayer. Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, my name's Jenny and this is Arnold the Praying Penguin. And let's get into the first myth. Myth number 1. Prayer is boring. Of course, prayer can be boring if you make it boring, but think about any other conversation or relationship that you have with other people in your lives. Sometimes they might be boring, and sometimes they're not. So what is it that stops those other conversations and relationships from being boring? Partly it's knowing and liking the other person, partly it's the way that you talk to them and how you go about having your conversations, and sometimes it's also the things that you're talking about. So when it comes to prayer, there are times for having very serious conversations with God, and when you need to turn to God in sadness or in desperation, and you need to talk to him very seriously. And some people might consider that boring, but that's a reflection of your emotion. But there are also times when prayer can and should be fun. It should be something that we can do full of joy and happiness, something that we want to do. And part of this comes from knowing and loving God. If we understand who God is, who it is that we're speaking to, and we love him and want to spend time with him, then that relationship is not going to be boring. Plus, there are so many fun and creative ways that we can spend time with God, whether that's being outside on a prayer walk or using creative prayer ideas to be really creative and crafty with our prayers. To a certain degree, you can tailor the way that you spend time with God to the things that you enjoy doing, just as you would with many other kinds of relationships. You do things together that you enjoy, so no, prayer is not boring. Myth number 2 is that prayer is a last resort. Often we do find ourselves naturally praying when nothing else has worked, when we're feeling that despair and hopelessness. Even atheists will often turn to prayer in those kind of circumstances. Perhaps if you were ever fearing for your life. Perhaps if someone you loved was dying and you were praying for their healing. Those kind of desperate situations can draw prayer out of pretty much anybody. But that doesn't mean that prayer should only be used as a last resort in those really hopeless circumstances. Prayer should be our first stop, not our last. And that might even save us a whole lot of stress because we can bring that situation to God right at the beginning. And this can help us to tackle that situation as we go through it, knowing that God is with us and that we have his peace. Myth number 3 is I am too busy to pray. You make time for the things that you care about. So you have to ask yourself, is prayer a priority in my life? If it is, then I need to make time for it and I need to make sure that it fits into my day. Maybe there's something else that I need to stop doing if I just don't have time. But prayer shouldn't be the thing that we stop doing to make room for something else. Because as Christians, that relationship with God is so important in our faith. And it's important to remember that prayer doesn't need to be complicated or long-winded or take up several hours of our day. Of course it can if we have that time and want to spend it with God in that way. That can be so powerful. But on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't need to be hours of every day. Prayer can be something that we're doing throughout our day as we're doing other things. In fact, the Bible tells us to pray ceaselessly. And that of course doesn't mean that we don't do anything else in our day. It's just that prayer is a thread that runs throughout our day and is part of everything else that we're doing. And if you're looking for more ways to incorporate prayer into your daily life, or if you're just feeling like you're too busy to pray, I recently made a whole video full of prayer tips for busy people, and I will link that down in the description, so do check that out. But no, you're not too busy to pray. You just need to think about how prayer fits into your day and what else maybe you need to move around or stop doing to make sure that you are spending time with God. Myth number 4 is that if I believe enough, my prayer will be answered. Now, it's true that we need to pray in faith. We need to believe that God can answer our prayer and pray to him in faith. But there are so many other reasons why our prayer may not be answered, even if we fully believe that God can do it. It might not be God's will for our lives. It might not be what is best for us, even if to us it feels like that would be the best thing. It might not fit with God's timing. Or perhaps we're praying for something that goes against God's nature. The Bible also tells us that God will not give us bad things, only good things. but we often don't know what is good for us and what is bad for us. God is the one who knows best. But often that can seem to us here on earth like God is not answering our prayers, or at least not in the way that we want him to. And myth number 5 is that prayer doesn't work. Now, as we just talked about, prayer isn't always answered in the way that we want it to be. We don't always get the things that we pray for. But that doesn't mean that prayer doesn't work. There are so many stories of wonderful prayers being answered. I have seen prayers answered, and I've heard so many other wonderful stories of God doing miraculous things in people's lives. And we also need to consider that the aim of prayer is not just to get what we want. It's for us to have a personal relationship with God, to talk to him and hear his voice. Prayer changes us, it guides us, it turns us towards God's will. So even if we're not getting what we want, what we think God should be giving to us through prayer, prayer is still working. So what other myths and misconceptions have you heard about prayer? Let us know down in the comments, and maybe we'll do a part 2 of this video at some point. But if you've enjoyed this video, do like and subscribe to see more videos from me and Arnold, all about prayer, exploring the Bible and living out your faith. And if you want to make sure that prayer is your first response rather than your last resort, do check out this video up here. And we will see you next Saturday for a new video. Bye!